let's invest this time when they're younger, because when they're older, they're so busy and they're doing so much that you got to kind of develop some kind of foundation to move forward with, and then find commonalities, like you said, to kind of keep that going over the long term.
So spending time together is obviously crucial, right? I mean,
Yeah.
FaceTime is great, but spending time together is really where those relationships blossom. And this is where sometimes there can be conflict between parents, grandparents, and then children as well.
Mm-hmm.
So things like screen time, things like, food, sugar, desserts, bedtimes, boundaries, rules. What advice do you have for parents about, yes, you are the parent and these are your children, but how do you handle some of those issues, knowing that, the grandparents, they are clearly, in most cases, competent adults who have already raised children?
I know, it's so interesting. I think that's just something you have to work out with your adult children. And I think it's so interesting because it is intense when they first have children, when they're firstborn. And you remember this probably with your own firstborns. You get, you're so hyper. Oh no, I have to do it this way. Everything has to, and by the time you have a third child, you're like throwing Cheerios at them and saying, fine, if, firstborn, you're saying, oh no, they're not going to have any gluten. They're not going to have any dairy. And then by the time
they're not going to play with toy guns. They're not going to jump on the couch.
They're not going to spend time watching television,
Yes.
So we've seen it happen. So, they come in the door with their kids and they have all these rules and regulations for the firstborn. And you just nod and you say, yes, of course. And you do what they say. I mean, my advice to every grandparent is just do what they say, because it's not going to last. It's just going to be for the firstborn, just like it was for you. So try to think back on that and just be, just nod and recognize in your wisdom that this is not forever, and then do whatever they say. I actually have grandparent friends who will say, oh yeah, she told me not to give him any gluten and I gave him a piece of bread because he really wanted it, or I gave him, I don't know. And I usually cringe because I think, if they ever find out, I don't want to do that, because you can really disenfranchise your
because
children.
Then it's a trust thing.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Like it really, in some cases, it is absolutely about the food, right? Like if I tell you that John has a peanut allergy and you're like, and you give him something, like that can be a danger.
That can be really bad.
But in a lot of cases, it's likely not that severe or life-threatening.
Right.
And so it's a trust thing. And if
Absolutely.
you lose that trust with your children, no matter how old your children are, that's damaging to the relationship.
And that's really what you want to do. So when you have new grandchildren, you just play the game and you do exactly what they say. And if they tell you no, don't let them come down when they're awake at 10:30 at night and sit on the couch with you. You put them back up to the bed and you do whatever they tell you. Because if they come in the door and you're sitting there with your 3-year-old grandchild, they're like, gee, we told you to put them back up there. Mm-hmm. And so we even if you have to write it down, if you can't remember, you just need to, and if you do mess up, you apologize. The relationship has got to be a give and take. You've got to be very just willing to submit to what they want. And then I can tell you that it does get better. And as they get older, as your adult children get older and they have more children, they tend to really loosen up a lot, and you can laugh about it and it's fun. But yeah, that's
such good advice, Emily. That is such good advice. Just to submit to those young parents and submit to them and support them in their decisions that they're making.
Then they're done that.
And I love that as you're saying this, in your own head, you've raised these children of yours for, 3 decades already. And you're like, okay, so this is another one of your phases. I get it. We're going to get through this one. Like, you have already survived, their young years, their tween years, their teenage years. You're like, okay, just hang on for a little bit more.
Just another stage. And I have to say that the stakes get higher as your grandkids grow and you see things that you maybe don't agree with. in their parenting styles, your adult children's parenting styles, the stakes are higher because you're talking about kids who, might have some real issues as they get older. And you see things that your children don't see because you've been through it already, and you've had friends who've been through it. And you've seen what happens with kids who are teenagers who have had certain kinds of parenting things. And, I really just had a conversation with my daughter about this, and it was a hard one. And I basically texted her and said, listen, I would be glad to write down and tell you what I think, but I think I would be afraid that could really go badly. So what I'm going to tell you is we differ in our parenting styles. I would not parent that way. And what I described to her was, it's kind of like Google Maps, where on your driving directions, it tells you can go one way or you can go another way. And, there might be a 10-minute difference. There's no right or wrong. There's not like, oh, well, that's the wrong way to go. You're going to get there, but you might get there with different scenery. Your life might look different because you chose that parenting, that option. But, and I said, listen, I'm here to support you. Stick to your guns. If that's what you want to do and you think the results are going to be good, I'm on your side. I want the results to be good. I want these grandchildren to grow up happy and healthy. And so I'm on your side. I'm not going to look back and say, oh, I told you so. My parenting style was better. We definitely need to kind of have that, again, that give and take of communication.
So how can we as parents tap into a bit of that? Most of our listeners are currently raising children.
Yeah.
We see our children through our eyes. Right. Grandparents do have the benefit of not living with the grandchildren all the time and the benefit of all this lived experience. Our grandparents may have some very valuable information that could be helpful to us. So what advice would you give to current parents for, being open to some feedback?
I would say if you value what your family life looked like